I think it's a really good presentation prepared today on the gut. It was one of your main requests. So top left, that's April 2025. The bottom left is the October, so it's the after. So before above and after what I call treatment is below. Now, up top, we see six markers, six organic acids that are very elevated. And on the bottom, the picture looks different and it's almost like it's zoomed in. And I want to clarify why that is. So in the top here, take this one, for example, the second one. If your result is in here, that's one standard deviation. If your result is here, that's two standard deviations. By definition, that's how all of these are marked. If you're outside, like over here, this 29, that's, I don't know, three, four, five standard deviations. What is a standard deviation? That's why I put this graph up here. The population who takes this one test, the number two here, will end up having results in this zone here, in this colored zone. 95% of the population will be within two standard deviations, basically to the left of this bar mark. And then three standard deviations is 99 or actually closer to 100%. You never get to 100% because there's always one in a million, one in 10 million, one in 100 million, right? But I thought it would be helpful to show this because if you do have a marker this far out, it's something you want to be very attentive to, I'll say. And so again, six of these nine markers for intestinal microbial overgrowth are positive, and not just positive, but extremely positive for the most part. And I'm basically going to walk you through it. You can see everything's not just within two standard deviations, but like it's actually normal. It's close to the mean almost across the board. The one exception is the arabinose, which is the Candida marker, which is still very abnormal, still very far outside of two standard deviations, but it did come from 129 down to 65. So it did improve by half. This is just a close-up. So let me go back to that slide I was just on. To make it a little bit more clear, I just took the first nine markers from this April test to demonstrate here, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit just on this April test. So this is just the April test, April 2025. These are the first nine markers that I've already indicated, but there are some additional 10 through 18 markers, and I'm sorry this is blurry. But I also wanted to just show you there's still a couple technically not in the red zone, but they're still outside of one standard deviation, including this one Clostridia marker, which is just outside of the second standard deviation. So it is a little bit elevated. And this is one, sometimes you want to be within one standard deviation. Sometimes you want to be less than one standard deviation. Sometimes it's actually not a big deal if something is closer to two standard deviations. That's true with any test we're talking about. But for this one, it truly is best to be closest to the mean as possible. And I'll share a little bit about why that is. But I just wanted to, again, zoom out, show you that there's other markers that this particular oats test or organic acids test tests for. And so this is the October one. Again, so out of those seven that were abnormal, six of them are normal. The other one improved by 50%.
As always, this video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice or create a doctor-patient relationship.
What is the cumulative microbiome debt of a lifetime of modern medicine? A single course of antibiotics can alter your microbiome for up to 2 years. I would argue longer, but when I looked in the research, I could only find 2 years. The average American child receives 17 courses of antibiotics before age 20, which is completely insane. And in my opinion, and just not just my opinion, but based on experience, I would guess that one or two out of those 17 courses on average is probably actually a good idea or called for, because there certainly are times when antibiotics are like life-saving. When penicillin was discovered to use as a medicine in the Western world, completely life-saving so many times. So absolutely a huge fan of antibiotics, but I'm like one or two courses of antibiotics in a child's lifetime should be the max for almost every child. Obviously, there's outliers where more might be necessary. But what would it mean if some of what we call adult onset gut disease, autoimmunity, or even mental health challenges was the downstream consequences of that childhood antibiotic debt finally coming due? Just wanted to throw that in there and really let that sink in. And for those of you who watching, this applies to you too. Obviously, we don't have any children on here, but this applies to you. And I would encourage you to talk with your family members or friends who are younger, who have younger kids, because that is the time when we really form who we are and what our gut microbiome is. And if our gut microbiome is out of balance when we're a child, the whole way our psychology develops is going to be different. Literally, our outlook on life and the lessons we learn is going to be different. I'm making it sound very dramatic because it is. So sometimes being quiet is the best thing to do, and sometimes it's not. So that's my little hoorah-rah on going out and changing the world one person at a time. Please, I give you permission. So the RoVive Gut Healing Sequence, and I'm calling it the RoVive. This is a very standard functional medicine way of looking at it too. So I don't want to take credit where credit isn't completely due, but the way I tend to do it is a little bit different at times than standard functional medicine. So these are sequential for a reason. And I would say most gut protocols skip steps or start the next one too soon or do them out of order. But oftentimes it's just starting the next step too soon. So step one, it's read your map. This is where we get your objective data. Without the oats test, you're guessing, or some stool test perhaps, which I'll talk about later, you're guessing. Now, those tests cost money. So if you don't have the money to spend on them, that's where you use RoVive Guide to just talk about your symptoms, right? The more info you give it, the better. But if we can get objective data, the oats is usually a really awesome place to start. Step two, name your invaders, because Aspergillus is not the same as Candida. It's not the same as Clostridia. And the organism can absolutely be part of determining the specific protocol. Step three, clear the terrain. I would just say gently, especially if your system is sensitive, like Braina is or was and still is. The pace and the dosing is where the real medicine would come into play. And again, it's shifting out of that, got to kill it, into the we are just tending our terrain. Step four, replace what's missing, replace what the overgrowth has depleted, which can include bile acids, enzymes, nutrients. And then step five is reseed the garden or reseed the terrain when it's ready, not before. So in order of the yellow highlights, the first one, the 3-oxoglutaric, that's a general yeast overgrowth marker. The tartaric is the Aspergillus, which is a mold, can be very serious, especially when Braina had 6 or I guess 5 Aspergillus markers out of whack. The arabinose, I've already mentioned, already alluded, that's very specifically Candida. And then that 4-hydroxophenyl, I left out a letter, acetate, is the Clostridia specifically. And yeah, so I'll just say there's a lot of generalized gut protocols out there. Oftentimes they'll work. Oftentimes they're enough. If you don't know any better, if you don't have something like RoVive Guide, it can be a good place to start. But the more data we have, the more effective we will be. So name your invaders. I mentioned Aspergillus is a mold. It specifically produces aflatoxins and ochratoxins. It thrives when there's I'll just say mold exposures like water damaged buildings, HVAC systems. Literally yesterday, I was with a patient, been seeing her for maybe a year and a half. She's had a number of odd symptoms. And on my intake questionnaire, there was a lot of mold questions, like trying to figure out if mold was an issue. And she answered all negative. Now, this is at least a year ago, year and a half ago, maybe. But she just discovered 3 weeks ago, basically early May, that she had black mold, visible black mold in her bathroom growing behind the wall. And again, she's just had all these strange symptoms that we've done such a good job in every other way, and yet we weren't making progress. So it's just one other story about mold and how sneaky it can be because so often it's behind walls. But this is doing an oats test. It gives us some insight. Hey, do we need to go looking for that type of thing? Clostridia. So it's an interesting one. It's a particular type of bacteria, and it directly interferes with dopamine synthesis, and people can end up with mood issues, either depression, anxiety, low motivation, concentration, so ADHD. If you have a kid with these markers high, they're probably going to need some help. And it can even end up in some pretty severe situation like PANS and PANDAS, which is a totally different discussion that I don't think is worth getting into, but albeit very severe, basically neuropsychiatric type of conditions. And again, how many of those kids out there have not had an oats test who've been diagnosed with neuropsychiatric conditions? It could be very meaningful. Now, I put a couple of little aha moment quotes here, as you'll notice. What if your cravings aren't your cravings? Candida produces acetaldehyde, the same compound your body makes when it metabolizes alcohol. It also produces ethanol directly. Members with elevated arabinose, one of those organic acid, may be experiencing mild chronic intoxication from their own gut. Their sugar and carb cravings may be the Candida demanding its food supply, which is very different from a willpower problem. And this is the key, this last line. The organism is literally steering the behavior of a person. It's not a metaphor, it's actual biochemistry. And Candida, is the goal to eradicate Candida from the gut? No, it's to restore balance to the terrain. Every healthy gut in this world, I don't know, maybe there's some tribes somewhere that don't have Candida, but I'm not aware of that. My point is everybody has Candida in their system, and the healthiest of people have Candida in their gut.